Good days, DIYer. Today we're going to do all of our front end suspension. So we're going to be completing the front end today. I will do the driver's side first, and it will be time lapse on the passenger side. And then probably after doing the front end suspension, next time we're gonna be doing also the rear end. Now we're gonna be just cleaning and repainting our brake calipers. So we have 2 rears and 2 fronts. We'll start with the brush and just remove all surface rust. After cleaning both of our calipers, you want to make sure to add bolts on the bleeder line and the brake hose line on both of them. And then this is totally optional, but I will spray them. And then let it dry for the first coat. I already did the second coat of our front calipers. Now as far as the brake calipers bracket, you just want to remove surface rust. Like this one is really in bad shape, a lot of rust. But this one I was able to remove the surface rust and then tape out both of the sliders. You can use wire brush, or also you can use wire wheel as well. I'm just using painter's tape, and then I will be covering this slider. And now as far as the brake caliper brackets, I will paint them black. And then we will just let this one dry, and then we're gonna do the next one. Alright, DIYers, after painting our caliper bracket and both of our front calipers, now we'll be installing the entire front suspension of the car, including the axles as well. As far as the rear calipers, I will be doing them once I'm ready to do the rear side of the vehicle. So these are the parts that we have, both of the front and both of the rears. And we also have new axles for driver and passenger side, new outer tie rod, new brake rotors, both of our refurbished front knuckles, new lower control arms, new upper control arms, new brake pads. Yep, it's the entire 9 yards for this front suspension. I already did a full suspension job on a Honda Prelude, and I think this one is another good addition to the front end of the Honda Prelude that we're currently working on. And as far as the tools that we need power tools or air ratchet, but this is the one that I have, so I'm going to be using this. Cordless ratchet as well. Sledgehammer. You need a pair of pliers, a set of wrenches, and then dip socket, shallow socket, and ratchets as well. So the first thing that we're going to be replacing would be the upper control arm. So this is the upper control arm that we have. You have two 14mm bolts that you want to remove on each side before you can pull this one out. And this is the old upper control arm. This is our new upper control arm. And now you just want to put back the two 14mm bolts. You just want to remove the nut and the cotter pin and this cover. After installing the upper control arm, the next thing that we're going to be installing is the new lower control arm. This one already came in with new bushings. And I'm also using high temp grease so I can add some inside of the bushing holes. Now we'll just install this lower control arm. This one is held by a 17mm bolt. And then after you hand tight the bolt, on this side, we will tighten this one up later once the wheel is already installed, so it could get a preload so it doesn't hurt the new bushing. Now you want to install two of the 17mm bolt here in this radius arm. After installing both of the bolt here, the radius arm, now we can grab our refurbished knuckle, and then you just want to put this one, the lower ball joint, on this side. We're going to secure it temporarily with the nut here at the bottom, and then now we can install our driver's side axle. And it's always a good idea to add grease. And then you also want to add grease at the other end of this axle. And then now we're ready to insert the axle to the half shaft. And there you go. After connecting the axle to the half shaft, now you just want to insert this other end of the axle to the hub. After inserting the axle to the hub, and now you can connect this two. Now you can tighten up this upper ball joint and the lower ball joint. The upper ball joint is a 17mm nut. And then after that, you just want to put your cotter pin. Now you want to tighten up this lower ball joint nut. This one, for the replacement one, is a 22mm. After tightening up this lower ball joint nut, now you want to secure it with new cotter pin. Okay, now the next thing that we're going to be installing is the brake rotor. And then now we're using new screw sets to hold the rotor. I got this one from Mission Automotive. And then we'll just be using a little bit of anti-seize. You don't want it super tight, just snug is fine. And the next thing that we're going to be installing is the brake caliper bracket. This one is held by two 17mm bolts, one here on top and then one here at the bottom. After installing the bracket, now you just want to install this where the brake pad glides, so you just want to put it in and you just push it in place. And these are new brake pads. You just want to add grease on both ends. Now we're going to be installing our newly painted brake caliper. And the brake caliper bolts are 14mm. You have two of them. And then after that, we're transferring brake line to this other brake caliper. And now this is the old brake caliper. Now you just want to attach this back. It's mounted by two 10mm bolts. And now you want to reinstall your ABS sensor. And the ABS sensor is held by two 10mm bolts. And then after that, you want to reinstall the two 10mm ABS bracket. The next thing that we're going to be installing is the shock absorber fork. The bottom is held by a 17mm bolt and a nut, and the top for the collar where the strut sits in, this one is a 14mm. And then now we're just putting our coilovers. And then you want to insert the bottom of the coilover here in this mounting hole. And now you want to install the 17mm nut here at the bottom. And the 14mm here on top. After that's installed, the next thing that we're going to be installing would be the sway bar end links. And this came in with the new rubber bushings too. The top nut on the sway bar end bushing is a 17. The one in the bottom is a 13mm nut. And then after installing the sway bar end link, the next thing that we're going to be installing would be the outer tie rod. And then use a 22mm to break the lock nut on this side. Now you want to use a 14mm to stop the inner tie rod end. What I normally do when I remove tie rod end, I always count how many times was this in this position, so I know how many times I counted in for the new one. And then will be the alignment guy who will gonna do the final alignment. So that's one full rotation. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So that's about 15 rotations. And there's our old tie rod end. And now this is our new tie rod end. You want to remove the lock nut here first, and the plastic cover. And then now you want to count 15 full rotation going in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and about 15. And after that, you just want to mount this one in. And then this one doesn't have any cotter pin, but it has this locking nut. It goes at the bottom. And this one is a 19mm. And then now you just want to tighten this one up, the 22mm. And then now what we want to do is to install this 36mm axle nut. We're using the new one. Now we'll just make an indentation here. So pretty much the driver's side is already done. The only thing that we have left to do is to tighten up the nut on top. Now we just want to tighten up these 3 nuts. They are all 16 millimeters. And that is our front end suspension. Now I'm gonna be doing the passenger side, and that will be a time lapse. All right.
One eternity later.
Alright DIYers, all of our suspension in the front end is already done. And here is the driver's side. The only thing that I need to do next is to bleed the brake and put in the tire and test drive. Stay tuned for the next upload. I will be doing the rear end of the car. Alright.